Welcome back to another dark tale from the Wasteland. Today, we are exploring one of the most controversial events in Commonwealth history, the Quincy Massacre, the moment when the Minutemen fell and a hero became the villain everyone remembers. But what if everything you thought you knew about that night was wrong? What if the greatest betrayal in Commonwealth history was actually an act of desperate salvation? What if the man who destroyed the Minutemen was the only reason the Commonwealth still exists? This is the confession of Clint, the traitor of Quincy, and the impossible choice that haunts him 5 years later. And if you genuinely enjoy this kind of dark storytelling, consider subscribing and liking the channel, but only if you like the content. They call me a traitor. 5 years of watching those words burn behind the eyes of every Minuteman I pass in the wastes. 5 years of carrying the weight of 23 bodies that fell at Quincy because I pulled the trigger myself in ways no one will ever understand. My name is Clint. I orchestrated the Quincy Massacre, and I need you to know why. I was a 10-year veteran of the Commonwealth Minutemen, serving under Colonel Hollis. 10 years of believing we could actually save something in this wasteland. 10 years of watching settlements rise because we stood between them and the darkness. Quincy was supposed to be our crowning achievement, the place where the Minutemen would finally plant roots deep enough that nothing could tear them out. But I found something beneath Quincy that changed everything. It started 3 months before the massacre. We had scouts reporting unusual activity near the old subway tunnels south of town. Not raiders, not super mutants, something methodical. Something that moved with purpose during hours when nothing living should be moving at all. Hollis sent me down with a small team to investigate. He trusted me. God help me. He trusted me with everything. What we found in those tunnels made my blood turn cold. The Institute had been busy beneath our feet, not just watching, building. We discovered access points to infrastructure that predated the war by decades. Massive fusion reactors connected through a web of maintenance tunnels that stretched beneath every major settlement in the Commonwealth: Diamond City, Good Neighbor, Sanctuary, Bunker Hill, all of them sitting on top of a network that pulsed with enough power to light up the entire region or reduce it to smoking glass. I need you to understand something about the Institute. They do not react, they plan, they calculate, they build contingencies for contingencies, and what I found in those tunnels was the ultimate contingency. Every reactor had modifications, Institute modifications, fail-safes rigged to detonate if specific conditions were met. I found the surveillance logs in a maintenance terminal that someone had forgotten to wipe. The Institute had been monitoring Quincy's development for 18 months, watching us fortify, counting our numbers, measuring our strength, waiting to see if we would become the threat they always feared we could be. The logs were clinical, cold. They detailed projections for what would happen if the Minutemen successfully established Quincy as a permanent headquarters. Population estimates, resource calculations, threat assessment matrices that ranked us somewhere between Brotherhood of Steel and Super Mutant Army. And there, buried in the data like a cancer, was the trigger protocol. The moment we declared victory at Quincy, the moment we made it our official command center and rallied the scattered Minutemen chapters under one banner, 17 fusion reactors would simultaneously overload. The Institute's surveillance network would detect the centralization. Their algorithms would recognize the pattern, and the Commonwealth would burn from below. I spent 3 days down in those tunnels, mapping everything I could. 3 days while my team stood watch, believing we were just clearing out some old Institute salvage operation. I documented reactor locations, copied surveillance data, photographed the trigger mechanisms I did not have the expertise to disarm, and with every hour that passed, I felt the weight of an impossible choice settling onto my shoulders like power armor I could never take off. I could not tell Hollis. The Institute had synths among us. I know that now. I did not know who. I did not know how many. But the surveillance logs made it clear they had eyes inside our command structure. Any attempt to warn the Minutemen leadership would reach Institute ears within hours. They would adjust, accelerate the timeline, or worse, they would detonate immediately rather than risk exposure. I could not disarm the reactors. I am a soldier, not an engineer. The technology was beyond anything our best mechanics had ever seen. One wrong move, and I might trigger exactly what I was trying to prevent. Or the Institute would detect the tampering and respond with overwhelming force. I could not evacuate the Commonwealth. Where would they go? How would we move tens of thousands of people without causing panic that would draw every predator in the Wasteland down on them? And even if we could, the Institute would know. They would see the exodus. They would understand that their secret was compromised. They would push the button just to prove they could. So I made a choice that haunts every breath I take. I contacted the gunners. The gunners had been probing our defenses for months, sizing up Quincy as a potential prize. They had the resources, they had the ruthlessness, and most importantly, they had the ignorance. The gunners did not care about the Minutemen as an organization. They cared about caps and territory. They would take Quincy because it was profitable, not because it was strategic. The Institute would see mercenary opportunism, not coordinated resistance. I spent 2 weeks building the relationship in secret, meeting their scouts in the ruins south of town, trading information that made my stomach turn. With every word, I gave them patrol schedules, weak points in our defenses, the locations of our ammunition stockpiles, and where Hollis kept his command center. Every piece of intelligence that would guarantee their victory felt like carving pieces out of my own soul. The gunners thought I was motivated by greed, by resentment, by the same petty politics that had been eating away at the Minutemen for years. I let them believe it. I negotiated for rank, for authority, for a position of leadership that would let me control the aftermath and prevent them from becoming the next trigger for the Institute's paranoia. But the hardest part was not the betrayal itself. The hardest part was the night I walked into our barracks and looked at the men and women who trusted me with their lives, knowing I was about to trade those lives for something they would never understand. Maria was on watch that night, 22 years old, had joined the Minutemen after we saved her settlement from a super mutant raid. She wanted to give back, she said, wanted to be the kind of person who stood between the innocent and the monsters. She smiled when she saw me making my rounds, asked if I thought we would hold Quincy against whatever was coming. I told her we would. I told her the Minutemen always found a way. I remember the trust in her eyes, the absolute certainty that as long as people like us stood watch, the Commonwealth had a chance. She was one of the first to die when the gunners attacked. The assault came under cover of night, just as I had planned with them. I had sabotaged our defenses earlier that evening, disabled the alarm systems in sectors 3 and 5, left the northeast barricades undermanned, made sure our heavy weapons were locked in the armory with guards I knew would not wake quickly when the shooting started. The gunners blew out the highway support beams, collapsing the overpass to create an elevated firing position that let them rain death down on defenders who never had a chance to establish proper cover. I had given them that strategy. I had pointed out exactly which supports to target for maximum tactical advantage. The firefight lasted less than an hour. We were outnumbered, outgunned, caught completely unprepared because I had made sure we would be. I fought alongside my brothers and sisters, returning fire while making sure my shots went wide of critical targets, playing the role of the desperate defender while internally counting down the minutes until it would be over. Hollis fought like a lion. God, he fought like everything I ever believed the Minutemen could be. Even when the lines collapsed, even when half our number lay dead or dying in the streets, he rallied the survivors, organized a fighting retreat toward the church, tried to buy time for civilians to escape through the northern routes. I made sure those northern routes stayed open. It was the one mercy I could offer, the one place where I could actually save lives instead of spending them. Preston Garvey led approximately 20 survivors out through that gap while the gunners were focused on the main battle. 20 people who slipped away into the wasteland while Quincy burned. 20 people who would rebuild the Minutemen slowly, settlement by settlement, scattered and decentralized in exactly the way that would not trigger the Institute's doomsday protocol. The gunners captured Colonel Hollis alive after the main fighting ended. They brought him before me in chains, forced him to his knees in the ruins of everything he had built. The gunners wanted a spectacle, wanted to see the former Minuteman execute his commanding officer to prove his loyalty to his new masters. What do you think really happened there? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I would like to know if I am the only one who feels this way about impossible choices. Hollis looked at me with something beyond hatred, beyond betrayal. He looked at me with the crushing weight of incomprehension, trying to understand how the soldier he had trusted for 10 years could stand before him wearing gunner colors, trying to find the words that would make sense of senselessness. I could not tell him the truth, could not explain that his death was buying the survival of everyone he ever swore to protect. The Institute was watching. Their synths were in the crowd. Any deviation from the expected script would raise questions I could not afford to answer, so I pulled the trigger, put a laser round through the heart of the best man I ever served under, and watched the light go out in his eyes while something inside me died with him. The gunners cheered, slapped me on the back, welcomed me as one of their own, made me lieutenant of Quincy, and gave me command over the ruins of my former life. I stood there, covered in the blood of my friends, and accepted their congratulations while my mind screamed into a void that would never echo back. That night I started my real work. The gunners gave me authority over Quincy's defenses. I used that authority to fortify in ways that looked aggressive, but were actually calculated to prevent the settlement from becoming strategically threatening. I kept our numbers manageable, made sure we stayed focused on local operations rather than regional expansion, sent our most ambitious members on scouting missions and raids that kept them scattered rather than concentrated. I assigned our most suspicious members, like Tessa, to patrol distant locations, kept them busy sizing up threats like super mutant strongholds and raiding the Atom Cats for power armor, made them feel important while ensuring they never accumulated enough influence to challenge my authority or accidentally steer the gunners toward becoming the next trigger for Institute paranoia. And in the shadows between orders and patrols, I began my second betrayal. I reached out to the railroad, not directly, never directly, but through the dead drop system they use for exactly this kind of covert communication. I left intelligence in mailboxes marked with their symbols, information about Institute movements I pieced together from monitoring their synth activity around Quincy, details about reactor locations I had discovered in those tunnels 3 months ago. The railroad thought they had an informant inside the gunners, someone sympathetic to their cause, who was funneling them strategic intelligence. They had no idea they were receiving information from the man who orchestrated the Quincy massacre. From a traitor wrapped in layers of deception so deep, I sometimes forget which mask is the real face underneath. I have mapped 17 reactor sites so far, 17 fusion bombs waiting beneath settlements full of people who have no idea they are living on borrowed time. Each site, carefully documented with technical specifications, the railroad can pass on to whoever might eventually have the expertise to disarm them. Each location tagged with surveillance data showing Institute monitoring patterns, but the work is slow, painfully slow. I cannot move too quickly without drawing attention, cannot ask too many questions without the Institute's synths noticing, cannot trust anyone enough to share the full picture, because the moment the Institute knows their failsafe has been compromised, they will push the button rather than lose their ultimate leverage. So I exist in this purgatory of necessary evil, wearing gunner colors while feeding intelligence to their enemies, maintaining the fiction of being a mercenary motivated by caps I never spend, playing the role of the heartless traitor while working every day to prevent the catastrophe my betrayal was designed to stop. Sometimes I see Minutemen survivors in the Wasteland, settlers who remember Quincy, people who lost family members in the massacre. The hatred in their eyes is a physical weight. They see the man who destroyed their hope, the villain who shattered the Minutemen when they needed unity most. They do not see the alternative. They cannot see the Commonwealth reduced to radioactive ash because I chose honor over survival. They will never know that their hatred is the price I pay for their continued existence. Preston Garvey is rebuilding. I watch from a distance through intelligence reports and gunner reconnaissance. He escaped with his group and is slowly bringing settlements under Minutemen protection again. Settlement by settlement, one community at a time, building exactly the kind of decentralized, scattered network that the Institute does not perceive as a strategic threat. It is perfect. It is exactly what needs to happen, and it is only possible because Quincy fell. Sometimes late at night, when I am alone in the command shack overlooking the ruins I created, I allow myself to imagine a different world, a world where I found another way, where I was smart enough or brave enough or skilled enough to defuse those reactors, to evacuate the Commonwealth, to warn everyone without triggering the catastrophe. But that world does not exist. In this world, in this wasteland, we make impossible choices with incomplete information and live with the consequences echoing in our skulls forever. I carry the names of the dead with me, all 23. Maria, who wanted to give back. Hollis, who believed in something greater than survival. The others whose faces visit me in what passes for sleep in this life I have made. Their blood bought time, bought space, bought a chance for the Commonwealth to survive long enough that maybe someday someone will figure out how to actually disarm the Institute's doomsday device instead of just avoiding triggering it. I tell myself that makes it worth it, that 23 deaths are a price worth paying for tens of thousands of lives. That being remembered as the worst traitor in Minutemen history is acceptable collateral damage for ensuring there are still Minutemen left to remember. But knowing something intellectually and accepting it emotionally are two different countries separated by a gulf I cannot cross. I am a traitor, a mass murderer, the man who destroyed the Minutemen's last real chance at unified strength. History will remember me as everything evil that can emerge when good people are corrupted by greed or cowardice or resentment. And the worst part is that history will be right about everything except the reason why. The gunners think they know me. They see a veteran Minuteman who got tired of playing hero for ungrateful settlers, a pragmatist who recognized that idealism does not put food on the table or keep you alive when the super mutants come calling. They respect that. In their world, betrayal for personal gain makes perfect sense. It is the lingua franca of the Wasteland. What they do not see is the system I have built within their system, the careful architecture of controlled chaos that keeps Quincy exactly threatening enough to be valuable, but never threatening enough to matter. I have been running intelligence operations for 5 years now, not for the gunners, for everyone they might accidentally destroy if they ever became what the Minutemen could have been. Every raid I authorize is calculated. When I send gunners to hit a caravan, I make sure it is a caravan that can afford the loss. When I order attacks on settlements, I choose targets that are already compromised by raiders or super mutants. Places where gunner occupation might actually be an improvement over what came before. It is a sick mathematics, a calculus of acceptable evil that turns my stomach even as I work the equations. The Institute is always watching. I know this because I have found their surveillance equipment in places it should not be. Monitoring devices disguised as pre-war debris, synths that pass through Quincy, wearing settler faces and gunner uniforms. They are checking on us, making sure the mercenaries who took their prize are not evolving into their next problem. So I give them what they expect to see. Gunners being gunners, territorial, opportunistic, violent when it profits them, predictable in their greed, and limited in their ambitions. Just another Wasteland faction carving out a small piece of hell to call their own. But in the spaces between the performance, I am bleeding information to the people who might actually save us. The railroad's dead drop system is brilliant in its simplicity. Mailboxes marked with symbols that look like random Wasteland graffiti to anyone who does not know the code. I leave intelligence packages twice a month. Technical data on Institute reactor locations, movement patterns of coursers and synth patrols, anything that might help them understand the scope of what we are facing. They have no idea who I am. The railroad, probably thinks their source is some disillusioned Institute scientist, or maybe a synth sympathizer embedded in the gunners. They would never suspect the truth, that their intelligence is coming from the man who killed Colonel Hollis with his own hands, from the architect of Quincy's fall. I wonder sometimes what Desdemona would do if she knew, if she would still accept my information, or if even the railroad has limits to what evils they will cooperate with. But I will never find out. My identity is the last secret I can afford to keep. 3 months ago, I discovered something that made the entire nightmare worse. One of my gunner patrols found a body near Jamaica Plain, Institute scientist, throat cut, stripped of everything valuable except a holotape that had been damaged in whatever fight killed him. The gunners brought it back as potential salvage. I claimed it before anyone else could examine it too closely. The holotape was corrupted, but I managed to recover fragments. Enough to understand that the reactor network beneath the Commonwealth is not static. The Institute is expanding it, adding new sites, upgrading existing failsafes with more sophisticated trigger mechanisms. What I found 5 years ago in those tunnels was just the beginning. They are building redundancy into their doomsday weapon, making sure that even if someone manages to disarm one reactor, a dozen others will still be online, creating a web of destruction so complex and interwoven that dismantling it might be impossible without triggering the very catastrophe we are trying to prevent. I added this information to my next dead drop, waited 3 days for the railroad to collect it, then watched from a distance as their agent retrieved the package and disappeared into the Commonwealth, carrying intelligence that should terrify anyone who understands what it means. The Institute is not just defending against surface threats, they are engineering permanent leverage, making sure that no matter what happens, no matter which faction rises or falls, they maintain the ultimate veto over Commonwealth survival. Push the button and everyone dies. It is the perfect deterrent wrapped in technology that makes nuclear weapons look like children's toys. And I am the only one who understands the full scope of it. Not even the railroad knows everything I know. I have to portion out the intelligence carefully. Too much at once and they might panic, might do something stupid like try to assault the Institute directly. That would end with them dead and the Commonwealth burning. So I feed them pieces. Let them build the puzzle slowly while I buy them time by keeping Quincy contained. The worst nights are when I allow myself to think about the future, about what happens if my carefully balanced house of cards collapses. If the gunners ever become too successful, too organized, too threatening, the Institute will notice. They will decide that Quincy has evolved into the strategic threat they feared the Minutemen would become, and 17 fusion reactors will turn the Commonwealth into a memorial to my failure. If the railroad ever gets compromised, if the Institute ever traces my intelligence packages back to Quincy, they will send coursers, real coursers, not the synth infiltrators I see occasionally on patrol. The genuine article that can tear through gunner defenses like tissue paper, and they will ask questions I cannot afford to answer. If Preston ever leads the Minutemen back to strength, ever decides to retake Quincy as symbolic justice for what I did, the Institute might interpret it as the resurgence they have been monitoring for, and the failsafes I have spent 5 years trying to map will activate before I can stop them. Every day is a tightrope walk over an abyss that wants to swallow the entire Commonwealth. I have thought about confession, about finding Preston somehow and telling him everything, showing him the evidence, the surveillance, logs, the reactor schematics, proof that Quincy had to fall to prevent something worse. But I know how that conversation ends. Even if he believed me, even if he accepted that my betrayal was strategic rather than venal, it would not matter. The moment that truth spreads, the moment people understand there are fusion bombs beneath their homes, panic will destroy us as surely as detonation. The Institute will detect the chaos, will recognize that their secret weapon has been exposed, and they will use it before they lose it, so the truth stays buried with me. Another weight on shoulders, already bent nearly to breaking. The gunners have started to trust me. 5 years is a long time in the Wasteland. long enough that the mercenaries who remember me as a fresh defector have mostly been replaced by recruits who only know me as Lieutenant Clint, the traitor Minuteman who knows the Commonwealth better than anyone else, the tactical genius who somehow keeps Quincy profitable without overextending into territories we cannot hold. Tessa still does not trust me. I can see it in how she watches me when she thinks I am not paying attention, looking for cracks in the performance, waiting for evidence that I might betray the gunners as thoroughly as I betrayed the Minutemen. She is right to be suspicious, just wrong about what the betrayal looks like. I use her paranoia, send her on the most dangerous scouting missions, keep her focused on external threats rather than internal politics. It serves dual purposes, keeps her away from Quincy, where she might notice things she should not, and gives her chances to die in the field without me having to arrange it directly. So far, she has survived everything I have thrown at her. The woman is frustratingly competent, but eventually the Wasteland will collect what I keep putting on her tab, and when it does, I will lose my most perceptive critic inside the gunner command structure. Baker is easier to manage. The man is a true believer in the gunner way. Strength through firepower, loyalty through fear. He sees Quincy as a fortress to be held and expanded from. I let him plan assaults on neighboring territories, then quietly sabotage the logistics until the operations become unfeasible. He thinks I am being cautious, protecting our position rather than overextending. He does not realize I am protecting everyone else from what we could become. The rank-and-file gunners are just trying to survive, same as everyone else in this wasteland. They did not sign up for cosmic stakes or moral philosophy. They signed up for caps and safety, and maybe a chance to die of old age instead of radiation or raider blades. I do not hate them for it. I am using them the same way I used the Minutemen, as tools to prevent catastrophe. If you have ever wondered what choice you would make in a situation like this, tell me in the comments. I will be reading them. There are moments of quiet in this life I have made. Moments when I am alone on the Quincy overpass watching the sun set over ruins I helped create. The collapsed highway sections create strange shadows across buildings where families used to live, where Maria used to dream about making a difference, where Hollis used to plan for a future that extended beyond next week's supply run. Sometimes I imagine I can still hear them. The ghosts of Quincy's last night, gunfire echoing between walls that no longer exist, screaming that ended 5 years ago but never really stopped. Hollis demanding to know why. Maria asking if we would hold the line. I held the line, just not the one they thought they were defending. The settlers who survived the massacre and fled Quincy hate me with a purity that is almost beautiful. They do not have to wrestle with nuance or impossible choices. They know exactly who the villain is. The traitor who sold them to the gunners. The man who destroyed everything good that was trying to happen in the Commonwealth. They are right, and they are wrong. And the space between those truths is where I live now. I have spent 5 years feeding intelligence to the railroad through dead drops. 5 years mapping reactor locations and institute surveillance patterns. 5 years keeping gunner operations contained to acceptable levels of wasteland horror, and I still do not know if any of it matters. Because the fundamental problem remains unsolved. The Institute has rigged the Commonwealth to explode if anyone becomes too much of a threat, and I do not have a solution beyond delaying the inevitable. The railroad is brave, but they are not equipped for this. They focus on saving synths, noble work in its own way, but they do not have the resources or expertise to dismantle a network of pre-war fusion reactors modified with Institute technology. They can barely keep their own safe houses from being discovered and raided. The Brotherhood of Steel arrived in the Commonwealth last year. I watched their Pridwin float overhead and felt something almost like hope. Here was a faction with serious firepower and technical expertise. Maybe they could actually do something about the Institute threat. Then I listened to their broadcast, heard their rhetoric about destroying synths and hoarding technology, realized they would try to assault the Institute directly without understanding the failsafes would trigger exactly the catastrophe I have spent 5 years trying to prevent. So I added them to my list of problems to manage, started monitoring their movements, feeding selective intelligence to both the Railroad and the Institute to make sure the Brotherhood's aggression gets channeled in directions that do not result in Commonwealth-wide annihilation. It is exhausting, spinning plates that want to crash into each other, preventing collisions between factions that all think they are the heroes of this story, being the villain everyone needs me to be so they can feel righteous in their various witch crusades. The Minutemen under Preston are growing, slowly but genuinely. I watch their progress through gunner reconnaissance reports, and it fills me with pride and grief in equal measure. This is what I bought with Quincy's blood, a second chance for an organization that deserves better than what I gave them. Preston does not know I am still protecting him, that I have redirected 3 separate gunner raids away from settlements under Minutemen protection, that I sabotaged an Institute operation that would have identified him as a priority target. He thinks he is rebuilding through pure determination and the support of random Wastelanders who still believe in the Minutemen ideal. He is, but he is also benefiting from a dead man's interference, a ghost in gunner colors, making sure the second chance I bought with betrayal does not get wasted. Sometimes I wonder if Hollis would understand, if I could somehow explain the reactor network, the Institute failsafes, the impossible mathematics of sacrificing 23 to save tens of thousands. Would he forgive me? Would he see the strategic necessity? Or would he spit in my face and tell me there is always another way? That real leaders find solutions that do not require becoming monsters. That the moment I decided some lives were worth less than others, I stopped being a Minuteman and became exactly what we swore to fight against. I will never know. The dead do not offer absolution. They just watch from whatever place the dead watch from and wait to see if we were right. The caps the gunners pay me pile up in a footlocker I never open. 5 years of mercenary wages I have not spent a single cap from. They think I am saving for something, planning for retirement, or maybe buying my way into some better situation. The truth is, I cannot spend money earned from the deaths of people I loved, cannot treat their blood like currency that purchases comfort. So the caps sit there, a monument to everything I have, lost, and everything I can never buy back. I am 38 years old. I have been Lieutenant Clint of the Gunners longer than I was Minuteman Clint. The role has become the reality. The mask has fused to the face beneath. Sometimes I forget which version is the performance and which is the truth. Maybe they are both true now. Maybe that is what betrayal does. Splits you into incompatible pieces that can never quite fit back together. The man who killed Hollis and the man trying to save the Commonwealth occupy the same body, but they will never speak the same language. Night is falling over Quincy again. Another day survived in the house of cards I built from corpses and lies. Tomorrow, I will send another dead drop to the Railroad. We'll redirect another gunner patrol away from settlements that cannot afford the attention. We'll maintain the careful balance that keeps the Institute from noticing how much I know. Tomorrow, I will wake up as the traitor, as the villain, as the necessary evil that everyone needs and nobody can acknowledge. Tomorrow, I will continue carrying the weight of impossible choices and pray it is enough to buy the Commonwealth one more day. The Institute made a mistake 6 weeks ago, a small one, the kind of error that happens when an organization becomes too confident in its own omniscience. They sent a synth to Quincy to verify our operations were proceeding according to their expectations. I recognized him immediately because I have spent 5 years learning to see the tells. He asked too many specific questions, moved through gunner-held territory with just slightly too much confidence, had the kind of clean efficiency that only comes from Institute programming rather than Wasteland survival. The other gunners did not notice, but I did. I played along, gave him exactly the intelligence he was fishing for, confirmed that Quincy remained a mercenary operation with no strategic ambitions beyond profit and territory. Let him see the controlled chaos I have cultivated so carefully. Made sure he left, satisfied that the gunners were exactly the kind of manageable threat the Institute could ignore. But before he left, I planted something on him a tracking device I pulled off a dead courser 2 years ago and have been saving for exactly this moment. Something small enough that Institute sensors might not immediately flag it. Something that might give me a breadcrumb trail back to wherever synths report after surface missions. It was a desperate gamble. If the Institute detected the tracker, they would know someone in Quincy was smart enough to recognize their surveillance and bold enough to try turning it around. That would raise exactly the kind of red flags I have spent 5 years trying to avoid. But I am running out of time and options. The reactor network keeps expanding. My intelligence gathering has hit walls I cannot breach without taking bigger risks. So I rolled the dice and waited to see what came up. 3 days later, my tracker went dark somewhere beneath the CIT ruins, right where everyone suspects the Institute's main facility is located. I got maybe 4 hours of useful data before the signal terminated. 4 hours of movement patterns and coordinate logs that tell me nothing I can act on, but everything I needed to confirm. The Institute is not just watching the Commonwealth. They are actively managing it, treating the entire region like a laboratory experiment with themselves as the only scientists who matter. And buried in that coordinate data were references to maintenance schedules, to inspection protocols for equipment that matches the technical specifications of the reactor fail-safes I found 5 years ago. They are still expanding the network, still adding redundancy, still making sure that no matter what happens on the surface, they maintain the ultimate leverage, and I am no closer to finding a way to dismantle it than I was when I first discovered those tunnels. Beneath Quincy, the information went into my next railroad dead drop, along with a note that I am running out of actionable intelligence, that whoever is receiving these packages needs to understand the scope of what we are facing, that good intentions and synth liberation operations will not matter if someone accidentally triggers the failsafe and reduces the Commonwealth to radioactive ash. I do not know if they understood. The railroad does not respond to dead drops beyond collecting them. It is a one-way communication system by design, safer that way. But it means I am shouting into a void and hoping someone on the other side hears the urgency in my silence. Preston Garvey liberated Sanctuary Hills 4 months ago. I heard about it through gunner intelligence networks, listened to reports about how a small group of Minutemen and a mysterious newcomer helped clear out raiders and establish a new settlement, how Preston is building something real again, something that looks like Hope wearing homespun clothes and carrying laser muskets. I wanted to feel proud, wanted to believe that everything I sacrificed at Quincy was worth it because the Minutemen survived. But all I felt was terror, because if Preston keeps succeeding, if the Minutemen keep growing, eventually they will want Quincy back. We'll decide that retaking the site of their greatest defeat is necessary for symbolic and strategic reasons, and I will have to choose between maintaining my cover and preventing them from walking into a trap that exists on scales they cannot imagine. I have prepared for this. Spent the last 4 months subtly fortifying Quincy in ways that look aggressive, but are actually designed to make the settlement appear more dangerous than it is. I need the Minutemen to see Quincy as a fortress that would cost too many lives to retake. Need them to decide their resources are better spent elsewhere. Need them to leave this cursed place in gunner hands for just a little longer. But I know Preston, knew him before Quincy, when we served together in the Eastern Commonwealth. The man does not think like a strategist. He thinks like a true believer, and true believers do not calculate costs. They see what is right, and they charge forward, believing righteousness is its own armor. If he comes for Quincy, I will have to kill Minutemen again. Will have to defend the ruins of my greatest crime from the people who have every right to take them back. Will have to watch the hatred in their eyes intensify as I prove once more that I am exactly the monster they believe me to be. The alternative is letting them retake Quincy, letting them establish it as a Minutemen stronghold again, centralizing their power in exactly the way that will trigger Institute paranoia. And then I get to watch 17 fusion reactors turn the Commonwealth into a crater while I stand here knowing I could have prevented it, but chose mercy instead. There is no good choice. There is only the choice that keeps the most people alive. And I learned 5 years ago that I am willing to be the villain in everyone's story if it means there is still a story for them to tell. If this story has kept you listening this far and you want more of these dark confessions from the Wasteland, hit that subscribe button. It tells me someone out there is still paying attention to warnings like these. The Gunners are planning a major operation next month. Baker has been pushing for it, wants to expand our territory south toward Spectacle Island, take control of the coastal approaches and the salvage opportunities around the old waterfront. He has made a compelling tactical case. The operation would be profitable and relatively low risk if we commit enough forces. I am going to sabotage it. Not, obviously, not in a way that points back to me, but I will make sure logistics break down. Make sure intelligence is incomplete. Make sure enough small things go wrong that the operation becomes unfeasible before it launches, because expanding south puts us on a collision course with settlements that do not need gunner occupation. And because success would make Quincy look more strategically important than I can afford to let it appear, Baker will be frustrated, Tessa will be suspicious, the rank and file will grumble about missed opportunities, and I will absorb their disappointment while making sure they never understand why their commanding officer keeps holding them back from glory. This is my life now, preventing victories, ensuring mediocrity, making certain that the faction I lead never becomes successful enough to matter. It is the strangest form of command I could have imagined, leading by making sure we never actually win. I found one of Hollis's old reports last week. It had been filed in Quincy's administrative building before the massacre, somehow survived the destruction and the gunner occupation. Just a routine patrol report about super mutant movements near the coast, the kind of paperwork that fills the daily grind of keeping settlements safe. But it was written in Hollis's hand, his careful, precise lettering that made even mundane reports look important. And at the bottom, almost like an afterthought, he had written a note to himself, a reminder about why we do this work. People are counting on us, cannot fail them. I sat in that ruined building for an hour, staring at those words. 5 years of carrying his death. 5 years of wondering if he would understand, and there was his answer, written in his own hand. People are counting on us, cannot fail them. I did not fail them, Hollis. I failed you. Failed Maria and the 21 others whose names I carry like scars. But I did not fail the Commonwealth. Did not let the Institute turn the entire region into a monument to their paranoia. The people you swore to protect are still alive because I became everything you hated. I burned the report after I finished reading it. Could not risk someone else finding it and asking questions about why their commanding officer was weeping over Minutemen paperwork. But the words are burned into my memory now. One more ghost to haunt the spaces between heartbeats. The railroad is planning something. I can feel it in the patterns of their dead drop collections, the increased frequency, the urgency, in how quickly packages disappear after I leave them. They have been building towards some kind of operation, and my intelligence is part of whatever they are planning. I do not know if I should be hopeful or terrified. If they succeed in whatever they are attempting, it might give us an opening to actually address the reactor network, might create chaos that lets someone with real expertise finally dismantle the failsafes. But if they fail, if they push too hard and trigger Institute retaliation, everything I have sacrificed becomes meaningless. I am not in control anymore. Maybe I never was. Maybe all I have done is buy time for someone else to find the real solution. Time purchased with blood and betrayal, and the slow death of whatever made me human. But time is all we have in this wasteland. Time to find solutions. Time to become stronger. Time to hope that eventually someone smarter or braver or luckier than me figures out how to save everyone instead of just preventing them from dying. There are nights when I dream about confession, about walking into Preston's headquarters, wherever he has established it, and laying everything on the table. The surveillance logs, the reactor schematics, the 5 years of intelligence I have gathered. Proof that everything I did was necessary. In these dreams, he understands. He looks at the evidence and sees the impossible choice I faced and acknowledges that maybe, possibly, I made the only decision that could have worked. He does not forgive me. The dead do not allow for forgiveness, but he accepts that the villain he needed was still trying to be a hero in the only Indian way the situation allowed. Then I wake up, and I remember that I live in the Wasteland, not in dreams. And the Wasteland does not care about understanding or acceptance. It only cares about who survives and who does not. I am 38 years old, and I have been dead for 5 years. The man who served the Minutemen died at Quincy, alongside Hollis and Maria and 21 others. What walks around wearing his face now is something else, something necessary and unforgivable and absolutely vital to Commonwealth survival. I do not expect redemption, do not want forgiveness. I expect to die wearing gunner colors and be buried as the traitor everyone knows I am. And that will be fine. That will be exactly what I deserve. But maybe, if I am lucky, if the intelligence I have gathered matters, if the time I have bought is enough, then after I am dead, someone will find this confession, will understand that the Quincy massacre was not about greed or cowardice or any of the simple motivations that make sense in Wasteland logic. It was about making the hardest choice possible and living with consequences that never stop echoing. The sun is setting over Quincy again. The ruins cast long shadows across streets where good people died because I decided their lives were the price of preventing genocide. Tomorrow I will wake up and maintain the carefully constructed fiction of Lieutenant Clint. We'll send more intelligence to the railroad. We'll keep the gunners contained. We'll watch for Institute surveillance and Brotherhood aggression and Minutemen resurgence. Tomorrow, I will continue being the villain the Commonwealth needs, even as it hates me. But tonight, in this moment of quiet before the performance resumes, I am just a man who made an impossible choice and will never know if it was right, a ghost haunting the ruins of his own greatest crime, a traitor who saved everyone by betraying everything. My name is Clint. I orchestrated the Quincy massacre, and when the Institute falls, when their reactor network is finally dismantled, when the truth comes out about what was really at stake, maybe then someone will understand that some betrayals are acts of love. Some monsters are made not by evil, but by caring too much about keeping everyone alive. And sometimes, the hardest way to serve the people you love is to make sure they hate you forever. This is my confession, my warning, my final testimony. The Minutemen at Quincy had to lose so the Commonwealth could survive. I will die wearing gunner colors, buried as a traitor, but at least there will be people left to bury me. And that is enough. That has to be enough.